What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another Angle of Pursuit podcast, your fantasy football, sports betting, and NASCAR home. Here to break down another NASCAR race. This time, we're flying from the great state of Florida to Vegas. We're going to hit the desert for the Pennzoil 400. Brian Twining, how we feeling? Kevin Harvick did not come through in a big way for us. Nobody outside the first 5 spots ever wins this race. Didn't come through in a big way for us. Mr. William Byron had a hell of a race on Sunday. His numbers were incredible. Started 31st, finished first. If you look at his driver rating, talking loop data, 139.8, better than pretty much everybody on the track. 33 fastest laps. He was just a monster. And Brian had him in his DK, and Brian ended up cashing. So good for Brian.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like he was probably, if not one of the most popular drivers last week, just because of where he was starting and the fact that he was coming off a top 10 finish last year in the playoff race here. So that's kind of what you find in these DraftKings like pricing, and you'll see it this week. I mean, you'll talk about a guy who is starting back in the field, who has tremendous success here. But I mean, this week they've priced him up, which is in contrast to the way Byron was kind of priced in the medium range because of his current year's success. Yeah. And so it's interesting building these lineups for sure.
Oh, 100%. And yeah, like you mentioned, we'll jump into our DraftKings plays for the week, kind of give you some thoughts there, as well as we're going to hit the betting card because we're going to try and find some winners this week. Obviously, Harvick didn't come through, but we're going to look at a few options, see if we can't find some value. Brian, before we do all that, I want to just talk about this race in general because obviously, the first few races, there's a few different kinds of tracks. There's a road track. They're kind of bouncing around. This week, we're basically running a very similar track to Homestead in Vegas. Are you going to weigh last week's results a little more heavily? Obviously, that we could easily go back to a lot of the guys we talked about last week, and we got to figure out if we should just go back to the well or what. But what's your kind of overall philosophy before we jump into this?
Yeah, I do think that kind of looking at similar tracks is the way you find the trends in these things, and the fact that this one is very similar to last week in Miami. I think that's probably why these guys are in the order that they are in terms of their odds of winning the race. And if you look at you see Kevin Harvick sitting there at the top.
Yep,
very, very much for the same reason as last week, and he was the first guy that I looked at. But of note, before we get too deep into the talking about betting here, there's never been a pole sitter in this race to win the race. So, I apologize. One time, 2009, Kyle Busch. So he's the only person to start and finish the race from the number 1 spot. So again, like last week, trying to bet a guy starting from outside of 23rd, I think was the lowest finishing spot. I just don't see betting Harvick this week with that trend.
Yeah, we'll see if last week was the anomaly and this week is, back to the trends, because I think over time, there is going to be weeks where it's not going to work out, but for the most part, I think the trends will keep us on path and keep us where we need to be. So let's dive into those numbers. As you mentioned, Kevin Harvick is the favorite, and I think we're getting a little bit better of a number with him this week.
Yeah.
There's a few guys inside that kind of 10-1 range. We got 9 drivers. You mentioned kind of looking there. Where else are you looking if you're looking inside 10-1?
Well, I mean, this is a guy that we're going to talk about a lot this season, and we mentioned him to begin the year, and somebody who we might talk about today, and that's got to be Kyle Larson. I know he's sitting there at 10-1, but I mean, for a guy who basically took an entire year off, he's been racing really damn well. He's got 2 top 10s. He leads all drivers this season with almost 97% of his laps have been ran inside the top 15. He has the 6th most amount of fastest laps on the year. He's got the 5th best driver rating, which takes all of those numbers into account, average running position, where you finish the race, fastest laps, blah blah blah, all that garbage, passes.
And unlike QBR or other stats that people pass off, driver rating is incredibly important, and really is significant. And traditionally, when you see a high driver rating, it's a driver who performed really, really well in the race.
Yeah, and I think it's really important when you look at the driver rating. What goes into that too is pass differential. So they take into account like where you start, as opposed to how many people are passing you from that position, or how many people you're passing. And he's right up there near the top in that metric as well. And then in terms of racing here at Las Vegas, I mean, minus the one he missed at the end of last year, his worst finish here is 12th over the last 6. And his other 4 races are 3rd, 2nd, 8th, and 9th with 2 consecutive top 10s in this race. So that number at 10-1, double-digit odds for a guy who's ran that well, that'll probably be the number that I'm betting on Sunday.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. Kyle Larson is the guy that sprung to mind first. He had the 3rd best driver rating at Homestead. As I mentioned, Homestead and Vegas have a very similar track setup. The only 2 people that drove better on Sunday is Martin Truex, who is 650, started 9th, ended up finishing 3rd, ran an incredible race. And then obviously William Byron, who ended up winning the race and coming from 31st to do so. 33 fastest laps, 102 laps led. Was really dominant, and if you had him in your DK lineups, as we get shifted when we shift to talk about that, those dominator points early and late and just dominating so many laps, really made a big difference. So not only did you get the placement points, but you got the where he ended up dominating all those laps. Outside of him, like Harvick's interesting to me. Chase Elliott, and whatever. He's fine. Truex would be the other guy, I think, if I was going a little bit higher, just because I think he seems to be finding his form. He ended up running really well by the end, and I think is a guy who, traditionally in these track setups is just super dominant, and could make a lot of sense, especially if even at that almost 2-1 for a top 3. I think that could make a lot of sense too, even though it's a little bit short of a price than we typically like.
Yeah, I think Martin Truex is the preferred option for me when looking at the top 2 guys there. I'm looking at kind of the mainstays in terms of like Logano and Keselowski again. They both run fairly well here. Denny Hamlin doesn't really have the greatest success at this track, so he's somebody I kind of, even though I think he's 1st or 2nd in like driver points or driver rating this season. I mean, him and Harvick again are dominating in terms of their average finishing and all those other numbers this year. So you can't count him out. But I think the other 2 guys that, again, we can't forget about the home field advantage here with the Busch brothers. I mean, Kurt Busch, we saw him win last year, and Kyle Busch still looking for that first victory at home. Or second victory at home. I think for a guy who's been really struggling, Kyle Busch at 13-1, really looking to get his name back on the map, I think this is a good spot to, put a few dollars on him just in case he runs his best race in the last 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that last year just it was just a year from hell. And so I'm expecting him to bounce back in a big way, and this would be an interesting spot. Starting back in the middle of the pack, should be plenty enough opportunity to get up to the front and win this thing. As you mentioned, Kurt Busch starting 7th is popped up on the old leaderboard in terms of betting odds this week. Moving up pretty substantially. William Byron sitting there 18. And then beyond there, is there any outrights you're looking? We kind of mentioned Larson, we mentioned Truex. Denny Hamlin at 9-1, Ryan Blaney at 13. Like obviously from a DK perspective, we're going to be interested. Is he an outright bet? Is he someone you're considering going to, even with his starting position?
Blaney is somebody I really did kind of look at him, but I do think that he's been too inconsistent for me to put my money on him to win the race. I think the other guy on that list of people that I am looking at, and I'll talk about him in a little bit, would be Alex Bowman, sitting there at 18-1. I think he's kind of a guy who's been under people's radars so far this year.
Yeah. Yeah. And even, with him, you're plus 450 for a top three, just a little less than on even money for a top 10. So top five is probably like 2-1. I could definitely see myself getting invested at that point. From a betting perspective, what else, any, should we move on to DK, or do you have any more top 5, top 10s that you're looking at for longer shots?
Well, I mean, I don't want to talk too much about the guys. I'll talk about DraftKings, but there's like so one of the bets that I'm doing this week, and we've hit on this before, is like driver matchups. For instance, I think Kyle Larson versus Denny Hamlin is one of the matchups they have. Kyle Larson is basically even money. He's minus 106 right now against Hamlin, and Hamlin has only finished inside the top 10 once here, being last year's playoff race over the last 6 races. And I already spoke to Kyle Larson's success here. So I'm looking at Larson, who is starting at the top of the field to finish ahead of Denny Hamlin in this race.
I like that a lot. I like finding, because then you're not worried. Like, you can find different ways to attack. Like, we're both really excited about Kyle Larson. So, finding ways to attack him, finding ways to have him bet him, put money behind him, and not need him to win the race at good odds, I think could make a lot of sense. So I'm gonna look for some matchups. I'm gonna look for some groups like we did last week, and I'm gonna look at top 5s, top 10s with him as well. Let's shift over and talk about some of those DFS names, because you got some good names. Obviously, there will be some crossover for the betting market, but from the top, 10K. And let's start, before we dive into our core, it's a very interesting week, because I think Kyle Busch and Martin Truex both make a lot of sense, but they're both over 11K. So you're going to have to find some ways to save some money. Now, that could be a good way in a GPP to be a little different, to find ways to separate yourself, because everyone else is going to look at that 9 to 10K and see Kyle Larson, see Ryan Blaney, see Brad Keselowski, see Joey Logano, and be able to put lineups together so much more easy. So are you trying to get in a 1 or maybe 2 of those 11K guys, or you just writing them off because they're too expensive, especially for what you need and where they're starting?
Well, let's just say I really wrestled with putting both Martin Truex and Brad Kaslowski in my core. I mean, I think both of these dudes have a good shot at winning this race here. I mean, you talk about Martin Truex, he's tops of all the drivers this year with the fastest laps. He's got the 7th best driver rating. 5 of 6 races here at Vegas, he's finished 8th or better. 4 top 5s. I mean, this guy is fantastic at this track.
Yeah.
And he's improved his finishing spot each of the 3 races this season, last week finishing 2nd. So, I mean, how do you not go for a guy who he's starting, was he starting 4th this week as well? Like, you're getting good value for, potential to move up 3 spots, and he's right there for the ability to lead laps, which is how you rack up those points. So, I mean, that would be the guy. You probably wouldn't want to go Truex and Larson for that same reason.
Right. So you definitely want to figure out who your dominator is going to be.
Yes.
I like Kyle Larson a lot. I'm curious to see what his ownership might be. We were both just glossing over Kevin Harvick, who is incredibly affordable, starting in the pole. And obviously, he could lose a couple of spots and cost you. But if he runs really well, like he has in a lot of races, and dominates the race and leads a lot of laps, you're going to rack up those points, even if you're not getting the differential. So, that's where you got to figure out where you're going to go. You got to start there and figure out who your dominator is going to be, and then kind of fill in behind them. So let's look at your core and see where your head's at, because obviously you're starting. There we go. This one. You're starting with Brett. You got Brad Kaslowski, 10,300. Obviously, starting 10th has move up points, has dominator points, and makes a hell of a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think this is the first out of the first 4 races that I'm not choosing a guy that's like starting in the first 2 rows, I believe. And, that could come back to bite me in the ass here. But that being said, Brad Keselowski, as much as he's burned me in the past, and he's very much up there with Joey Logano in my eyes in terms of every time I go for him, he winds up screwing me over. But when you really look at his 2021, it looks a lot worse than it's actually been when you factor in last week he led 47 laps, which was I think the second or third most during the race. Mm-hmm. He was running near the top of the field pretty much the entire day. When you look at the Daytona 500, he was in position to take the lead and win the Daytona 500 from Joey Logano until Logano inadvertently, or should I mean, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt here, when he just cut in front of him and they both crashed out of the race. Yeah. And, he had a great finish there at the Daytona Road Race as well. So you're looking at a guy who's running really well. Here at Vegas, he's got 3 top 3s and a victory in 2018. So at 10,300, starting 10th, and all those movement points that I'm going to get with the possibility of him also leading laps, I think that's why he became my dominator pick. And then I spoke Alex Bowman's success here. He's got 2 straight top 10 finishes since Daytona 500. His average finish at this Vegas race is 11th. 2 of the last 3 have been inside the top 6, starting 9th. So I think he's going to stay within the top 10 pretty much the entirety of the day. And then looking at Cole Custer and Chris Boucher, both of these guys are having really good 2021s. And when you look at what they're doing here at Vegas, Cole Custer's average finish is in the Xfinity Series at Vegas was 7th. He finished 3rd in the 2016 during the Truck Series, and he's increased his finishing spot each of his first 3 times in the Cup Series at 25th, 19th, and 16th. So yeah. Custer at 6,500, starting 20th with the potential of getting near the top 10. I like that. And then when looking at Chris Boucher, he's another guy. He's got the 11th best average finish here at 15th over the last 6 races. So he's starting near the back of the field as well over here at 18th. So I'm looking at movement points for extremely low salary.
Yeah. So Boucher, I'm not really sure how to say it, but we'll go with either or both. Actually led the second most laps last week at Homestead, just below William Byron, just above Brad Keselowski. 62% of his laps in the top 15, started 12th, finished 19th. Not exactly what you're looking for from a DK perspective, but I think he has a chance to move up. I think he has a chance to perform well. And at that salary, it allows you to just jam in a lot of other really interesting names. So I'm probably going to use both those 6K guys this week and, make my lineups really flexible with my other 4. With my 4, Ryan Blaney, 10,800. It may be chalk, but it's going to be good chalk. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it's a great spot to go. Starting in the back of the pack, so much potential to move up. Guy who's dominated at these tracks. If you want to fade him, he would be an easy fade, and you could kind of go a multitude of different ways, and then you're banking on basically him not being as good as he was last year. I'll probably have a little bit of both, a little bit of Blaney lineups, a little bit of non-Blaney lineups, and go from there. I'm all over Kyle Larson, 9,400. I think he can be your dominator from the 3rd spot. I think he can run really well, have a big, strong race, and rack up those points. Matt DiBenedetto is somebody that was really interesting to me. 9K is kind of pricey, but you were mentioning before the pod his recent run of success. Do you have that handy still?
Yeah, both races last year he finished 2nd runner-up in both of those races, starting from the 19th position as well.
Right, and he's starting 30th, so that's placement points, that's movement points, that's a lot of stuff, and I think he's somebody that kind of fits in with a lot of different lineups. If you want to go stars and scrubs and kind of jam them in, if you want to go more balanced, you could do that. There's a few different options, and I'm going back to Eric Jones because I'm an idiot, but I like him. I think he runs really well at these kind of tracks, and you have to save salary somewhere. And 7,100 is really, really affordable. A lot of movement points. I think he can perform well here and has a chance to move up as well. So that's where I'm looking at. Obviously, we're recording this a day early. So we, DraftKings just dropped these prices. We're getting our teeth into it now. Brian and I will be tweeting this out. Oh, I just noticed this. That is crazy. Brian and I we'll try and tweet out some more stuff as the week rolls along. Had to tweak the schedule a little bit this week, but appreciate y'all checking us out. But Brian, that gives us an extra day. That gives us more time to prep. And we're figuring this stuff out. We're going to find some winners. We're going to find some cashing DK lineups. We just hit the 20-minute mark. Are you ready to drop some best bets?
I got one more driver matchup that I think that people need to jump on before the line moves here, and that is Chris. I'm going to call him Boucher going up against Bubba Wallace at minus 115. Give it to me. Boucher, like I said, the 11th best average finish here at 15th here over the last 6. Bubba's is 25th he's averaging finishing 24th here. Boucher's worst finish here is 18th, twice back in 2019, whereas Bubba only has one finish inside 21st in the last 6 races. So give me the guy who has consistency at the same number against the name Bubba Wallace, who I love Bubba Wallace. I'm all in on 2311 Racing, but this just isn't the track for him.
I'm writing this down so I actually bet it this time, but yes, I'm going to be betting that. I like that call quite a bit. I was just looking at Matt DiBendetto's top 5 odds, 9-1, Brian, for a guy who's finished second back-to-back years. I kind of like that.
I am slightly worried at the fact that he hasn't ran 100% of the laps in any of the first 3 races this year. So that is something I would kind of.
That means he's due, right? That's how it works.
Yeah.
As for I will definitely be targeting that. I'm also, for my best bet for this week, I'm all aboard the team Kyle Larson, and I can get a top 3 for Kyle Larson at plus 290. And that will be my best bet.
Whew. Oh man, I'm actually all in on that. I will be placing a similar bet and also hedging with a top 5, which is what I did last week with Kevin Harvick, and thank goodness, sweating that last lap out there. For me, I was really looking at going Martin Truex in the top 3 here, but I think I'm gonna go. Man, I hate doing this because I get killed every single time, but give me Brad Keselowski. I'm going to go right with you with a top 3 finish at plus 235. I think Big Brad is ready to move up at least 7 spots here and help me take home some cash on DK and at the sportsbook.
Oh, that's a double dip of Keselowski. I don't think anyone's ready for that. Yeah, no, I mean, it feels like the right play. Like I'm all on board with that. Yeah, and as in terms of outrights, I will take a shot at Larson. I don't know. I want to bet Blaney, but I also it feels like a bridge too far. I might look at a top 3 or top 5 for him and see if I can get there with that. Are you betting or what? We talked about the outright market, but are you going to dive in on any outrights or just stick to the matchups and whatnot?
I mean, I'll probably put a few dollars on Larson with the outright at 10-1. Like I said at the opening of the show, I really do think that out of those first 7 guys, I think he should be closer to the Keselowski and Chase Elliott number of 8-1 than the back half there, double digit line. So I really like that. And then I'm really looking at top 10s for both Cole Custer and Boucher. I mean, you're getting over 2.5-1 with both of those guys who have ran really well here. We've seen it throughout this season alone. I mean, Daytona, 15 laps into the race and 10 guys are already knocked out. So, I mean, anything can happen in these races. For 2 dudes that race really well here, I think there's a good shot at that happening.
Yeah, and as sexy as a 33-1 or a 50-1 or whatever that is, those odds are that way for a reason. They're really hard to get. So going, finding drivers you like, finding ways to target them in head-to-heads and matchups, in groups, and then get those top 3s, top 5s, top 10s, and make yourself some money. Build that bankroll, spill it out over the weekend. So I like that call quite a bit. Brian and I will also try and tweet out specifics if we find good props, we find good matchups, that kind of stuff. But Brian, good luck with Keselowski this weekend. You're going to need it.
Yes.
I'm really hoping Kyle Larson comes through in a big way. And then, we'll hopefully be back next week talking about all the money. And then we're going to try and get some fantasy football stuff going too in the near future. So we're figuring that out. If you made it this far, make sure you smash the like, make sure you turn on the bell notification when we post new content, and make sure in the comments you let us know who you like this week. We had a big bad Brad pick for last week. I don't hate going back to it this week. Brian's already there, so I like that. But yeah, let us know who you like. Let us know if you found any good matchups or any good groups or any of that good stuff. So for Brian Twining, I'm Kyle Robert, and we'll talk to y'all next time.